This is the download edition of World Business Report on Tuesday, the 17th of February. I'm Dominic Laurie. On the 4th anniversary of Libya's uprising against Muammar Gaddafi, we assess how its violent aftermath has destroyed hopes for jobs and economic success for so many of its people.
The world has forgotten about Libya. Libya is isolated, besieged, is descending into war. It's the criminalization of the war economy.
France says it will pass new economic reforms, but not via the usual channels, and it's kicked up a storm. And we go to Texas, where the falling oil price has been a curse for the fracking industry, but a blessing for others.
I love the price of gas because I can fill up my tank on $20.
So what are you doing with all the money you've got now?
I go shop.
Send us your views. Get in touch by email, world.business@bbc.co.uk or via Facebook at facebook.com/BBC Business. It may be the 4th anniversary today, the 17th of February, of the uprising against Muammar Gaddafi, but every story that comes out of Libya suggests a country becoming more violent and difficult to live in. Two rival governments operating their own armed forces under separate parliaments, plus Islamist militants, former rebels, soldiers who fought for Gaddafi, and tribal and federalist factions, all causing a chaotic mix. The beheading by Libyan Islamic State militants of 21 Egyptian Christians a couple of days ago being the most gruesome illustration of that. The UN Security Council has said it'll meet on Wednesday to discuss the situation. This lunchtime, the Egyptian President, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, has called on the UN to approve international military intervention against IS in Libya. President Sisi told French radio that unless something is done, the whole region could be at risk.
اللي بيحصل في ليبيا هتبقى بؤرة إرهاب هتوجه ضد المنطقة بالكامل.
What is going on in Libya could change this country into a breeding ground that will threaten the whole region, and not only Egypt. Egypt, the Mediterranean basin and Europe have to deal with this problem because the mission was unaccomplished, was unfinished by our European friends. We abandoned the Libyan people as prisoners to extremist militias.
Now, the devastation isn't just human and emotional, but economic. The oil and gas industry has managed to keep some production going, but Libya's oil production has fallen to around 350,000 barrels a day, a fraction of the 1.6 million barrels per day Libya used to pump before the NATO-backed 2011 uprising that ended Gaddafi's rule. On Saturday, Libya's National Oil Corporation said it urgently needed more official protection after an oil pipeline from its El Saria field was sabotaged. Other parts of the economy have suffered greatly too. Media has been heavily disrupted, with TV and radio stations stormed by militants. Husni Bey is the chairman of the biggest private holding company in Libya. Its main business is distributing products from snacks to pharmaceuticals in trucks to shops around the country. So how is the company coping in the civil war?
It is becoming difficult and challenging, and we are under constant crisis management situation. But we keep on trying because we need to provide the necessities to all the people. It is extremely difficult, extremely costly. It is very difficult to find people willing to do it, but some with great determination and willing to help. We are just covering, but it's not easy. Anything can get disrupted any minute, any time, and people can end up with bullets in their heads.
Yes, how do you try to guarantee the safety of your employees?
The first thing that we tell all our employees, their safety, of course, is first and foremost. Some of them take their own risk, but something that we completely discourage them to do. But because they belong from one area or the other, and they feel that it is urge and need to deliver baby food and medicines, they do take risks, even though we tell them that it is not a question of bravery, it's a question of safety and security first. But yet many go ahead and do it.
Have you had any employees injured or killed?
Killed so far, not luckily, but we had one injured on the way coming from Garian to Tripoli after making a delivery there. But of course, warehouses have been looted, some warehouses have been even hit by missiles. So our major warehouses at Benghazi have been completely taken over.
Taken over by militia?
By militias, yes.
So what do? Do you have to deal with the militia, or do you store stuff elsewhere?
No, absolutely. We simply, because we are present almost in every city, so we just move the operation to another center out of our 24 centers around the country, and we simply write off the center that has been taken over because there is nothing much that you can do about it.
Have the militia approached you and asked for protection money? Have they threatened you? Have they said, deal with me, deal with us, or we'll kill you?
Threatened as to kill, not so much. but they have offered, some of them offer protection, but we had always refused any sort of protection. So practically we are just protected by our normal security, which is usually unarmed security. But once you get attacked by people on four-wheel drive trucks with anti-aircraft machine guns, all you do is just leave the place and let them do whatever they want.
So that has happened, has it?
It happened in Tripoli, it happened in Benghazi, and unfortunately by everybody. So there is no one innocent. Everybody is culpable.
How do you feel about what's happened to your country in the last year?
Very disappointed. Highly disappointed for the outcomes. Of course, not sorry for the fact that Gaddafi has been toppled, but very disappointed that it's not what we Libyans were looking for.
And what's the future for your business?
We are carrying on. We are not going to give up. This is our country, and we are sure that we'll sort ourselves out. The challenges ahead of us are tremendous, and we will not stop. We'll simply go on.
That's Husni Bey, a brave man, the voice of the experienced businessman in Libya. But what about the youth? Aya Manena is founder of the Libyan youth movement. I asked her to tell me about how her friends and contacts were able to go about their daily lives in Libya.
Effectively, it's been difficult to even keep in touch with a lot of our contacts because the electricity disconnects on a regular basis, preventing them from, coming online or charging their cell phones so that we can, speak to them, and also from getting their day-to-day kind of life together. But in terms of work, when, there's clashes outside, you can't secure your ability to get from home to work and back. And so people are kind of on self-imposed house arrest. Others are struggling to, finish their university studies because the universities have been shut down for months. In Benghazi, the university some of the faculties have been destroyed by the clashes. So a lot of people are kind of in this endless purgatory where they're waiting for things to happen and waiting for their life to continue, and it's effectively on pause.
The emotional mood and people you're in contact with?
My friends are very kind of depressed and frustrated with what's been going on. Being cut off from the outside world because of the consistent electricity cuts is closing, them off from everyone and cutting off their source of hope. Many of my friends have actually been forced to flee the country because of their neighborhoods becoming increasingly violent, and many of them hoping that it's temporary. One, because they can't maintain their stay outside for very long because of the limited resources, and two, because nobody wants to leave permanently.
That's Aya Manena, founder of the Libyan youth movement, actually talking to us from Winnipeg in Canada. Well, Fawaz Gerges is Professor of International Relations at the London School of Economics and the author of several books on the Middle East.
There is no economy anymore in Libya. The economy is frozen. You have now a war economy. You have chaos. The entire economic infrastructure has been disrupted. You have two warring governments, one in Tripoli and one in Tobruk. Battling each other for legitimacy. The oil industry is under control of the militias. There are no business activities. And whatever money exists basically is controlled by the militias, the various militias. The business economy, which is the nerve center of the Libyan economy, is under control of the militias.
So what you're saying is it still exists, but it's just in the hands of somebody else.
Absolutely. So what has happened is that the regular political economy has been transformed into a war economy. And the war economy is controlled by militias. And that's where young men go. Young men go to where the money is.
Yeah, so if you're a young Libyan man who's 18 years old, 20 years old, what you're saying is if you want to have a job, if you want to have employment, you now have to approach the militias that maybe control the local oil refinery or the local TV station or whatever.
Absolutely. And that's really exactly what's happening now. So the national economy has been basically hijacked by local militias, local networks, militant groups, and the two warring governments, one in Tripoli, one Islamist in Tripoli, and one nationalist in Tobruk. Just to give you an idea, when you talk about the macroeconomy, even the major banks, the major central banks, in Benghazi it was looted, in Tripoli is under the control of the Islamist-led government. So if the basically central bank that cannot act as a national institution, it tells you a great deal about the harm that has been done to the national economy.
Give us a sense of, statistics, unemployment rates, inflation rates. What are the bare bones of the economy?
No one, not even the World Bank and IMF, can really say what unemployment. I would say basically between 40 and 50% unemployment among the youth. And this is the critical segment. Inflation, you're talking about double digits. You're talking about poverty. And that's why criminal groups have emerged. And that's why militant groups, ISIS and Ansar Sharia and what have you, provide criminal activities, networks, money. The question is, why do young men join these groups? Not because they believe in their ideology. Many of the young men don't believe in these militant ideologies, but basically they subsist. They get their daily allowance from these networks and groups.
They have no other option.
Absolutely not. The world has forgotten about Libya. Libya is isolated, besieged, is descending into war. And that's why what we're talking about here, if you want to really see what's the term that best describes Libya, it's the criminalization of the war economy. Networks, groups, militants, militias, regions now control the economy and basically use the economy in order to recruit young men who are unemployed and basically are desperate to provide bread and butter for their families.
That's Fawaz Gerges from the London School of Economics, one of several voices we've heard in the last few minutes, just giving us a window onto what it's like to try to exist in an economy like Libya's, which has had so much damage in the last couple of years. The French government said on Tuesday it was passing President François Hollande's flagship economic reform bill, but not by the usual channels through Parliament. It'll be pushed through by decree, which is a rare move designed to take away the risk of it being voted out by parliamentarians. The opposition now has 24 hours to organise a no-confidence vote in the government. The reform package includes new rules to broaden trading hours and deregulate certain sectors. Our correspondent Hugh Schofield is in Paris. Hugh, give us a bit more detail about what's in the package.
Yes, well, it is a broadly liberalising, broadly pro-market bundle of more than 200 different measures. It's a real scattergun law brought together by this young finance minister, Emmanuel Macron, who is very much the figurehead of the new look François Hollande government, a look that's very much directed towards business and foreign investors. So a load of different measures, none of which in itself will add up to very much. For example, as you said, opening up more Sunday trading. They're not completely liberalising Sunday trading, allowing towns to open 12 Sundays a week, reforming driving schools, for example, reforming the the national coach service, for example, and changing rules on how the layoffs are negotiated when there are economic closures, things like that. A load of different measures, none of which announced very much in itself, but which altogether present, or intended to present to the outside world, an image of a France which is beginning the path of reform.
My friend, my old pen pal is a Facebook friend, Hugh, and he's married to a lawyer, and I know that lawyers are one of the professions being liberalised, if you want. He wrote on his Facebook page, "La France est devenue une dictature." France has become a dictatorship. This is controversial, is it, amongst some sectors of the population?
Well, you mentioned lawyers, because lawyers are very much going to bear the brunt of one of the reforms. The government would say, well, it's in the public good and things have to change, but lawyers certainly are very angry about it for reasons which are far too detailed to go into, but they don't like it at all. But it's very typical of the French economy, which is that there are so many different sectors, and whenever you target one of them and say, right, it's your turn to liberalise, open up, then you get this howl of protest and outrage, and the public tends to sort of side with the people who cry loudest.
And the interesting thing, Hugh, it's by decree, isn't it? This does sound abnormal.
Yes, it's not completely abnormal. The last time it happened was about 10 years ago, but it's a sign of a government in trouble. A government that can safely pass its legislation by an ordinary vote in Parliament obviously is a government which is happy and is going to continue down this road. But this has happened because there is a great fear of a rebellion among left-wing members of the Socialist Party, and at the last minute the government counted up the numbers and was not sure that it would get this vote through on a number count in Parliament. So it's had to take this other route, and that's been seen as a big moral victory for the left, and the left, the socialist rebels inside the party, but also the further left people, the Front de Gauche, the communists, the people who are attacking the government from the left. They're cock-a-hoop at what's happened.
Okay, thank you very much, Hugh Schofield, our correspondent in Paris. You're listening to World Business Report from the BBC World Service. Still to come.
About half the world has limited to no connectivity. There was only one way to solve that problem: a global satellite system.
Connected to the world via the internet, via space. But first, Fracking is a relatively new way to get at oil and gas reserves under the ground that were previously inaccessible with old drilling technology. It's one reason why the US economy has bounced back from recession so impressively. But what happens when the price of oil becomes so low that fracking no longer becomes economically viable? Our North America editor John Sopel reports from Midland and Texas.
There's still production going on at these oil facilities dotted across the landscape around the town of Midland, Texas, the epicentre of the fracking revolution, but the boom times have gone.
It's just after midnight. It's probably just below 0 degrees. We're at a frack site in West Texas on these vast flat plains. The wind is blowing across, and I'm joined by Steve Pruitt, who is the CEO of this operation. I think you had 6 sites at one stage. I think you're now only operating 2.
That is correct. We had 6 drilling rigs operating in December, and now we're down to 2 drilling rigs. And within a week, we'll be have 1 drilling rig operating, and it's about a mile east of us here.
Because it's not worth the money to get the oil out the ground.
That is correct, but it is heartbreaking. I'm only 53 years old, but I've been through 4 of these cycles, and they're all crushing. Every day we're hearing of new layoffs of people we know. And of course, you read the headlines of thousands being laid off by Halliburton, Baker Hughes, and it's only going to get worse before it gets better.
On this muddy quagmire of a site sits Storm MacDonald. He's in a trailer with a bank of bewildering screens in front of him, monitoring the frack. He's an oil man to his fingertips and told me what Midland was like just a few months ago.
In the boom time, the shelves are pretty much barren. It's hard to find a gallon of milk. Sometimes you got to go to the next town over.
And presumably the bars are doing a roaring trade.
Oh, that's the best time. All the bars every weekend are probably stacked up with all these oil field workers. Boom time's good for everybody.
It's not like that now. Restaurants are quiet, hotels are cutting their prices, stores are shutting up shop. But there is another side to this story. Just 100 miles north of Midland is Lubbock. This is not an oil town, and consumers are loving what the collapse in the oil price is doing to the price of petrol. At this service station, it's now just 33 pence a litre.
Oh yes, I'm enjoying it tremendously. Yeah.
Does it make a big difference?
It makes a big difference. You can save and spend money on other things.
I love the price of gas because I can fill up my tank on $20.
How much difference does it make to your kind of day-to-day life, the fact that you've got extra money to spend?
A lot when I've got 4 cars in my household.
So what are you doing with all the money you've got now?
I go shop.
Well, it used to take $75 to fill this thing up. Now it takes $40, so that's a lot of savings.
And there are all sorts of industry sectors that are benefiting too, from manufacturing through to farming, where fuel is a major fixed cost. These are good times. I met Doug Halavati, a cotton farmer with 5,500 acres.
Well, it's a big impact. It's another big expense we have. Sometimes we use 9 tractors a day, and the price has gone down nearly half of what we did pay for it, so that could save us $450 a day.
During World War II, this area produced 1/4 of the world's oil.
Back in Midland, there's a museum charting a history of the oil industry. One of the curators is Maurice Burns. He plays down the seriousness of this downturn.
These are much shorter downturns. We've all ridden this old roller coaster up and down for years and years, and so it's something that we're used to. We've come to expect it. What goes up comes down, and what goes down comes back up.
And maybe he's right. America isn't exposed in the same way that some other countries are to the downturn in the price of oil, and there are significant parts of the US economy that are positively benefiting. And what this low price doesn't change is that America has become the world's largest natural gas and oil producer, with dependence on foreign oil at a 20-year low. And in Washington, they like that.
Very interesting. John Sopel with that report from Midland in Texas. Now, the oil price, the falling oil price, is something that our markets guest Russ Mould, investment director at the stockbroker AJ Bell, would often be looking at. But Russ, today you found something different. You found a link between the UK and Indonesia.
Yes, the Indonesian central bank surprised absolutely everybody with a cut in interest rates today, 1/4 percentage point to 7.5%. The Indonesian central bank clearly concerned about growth, concerned about whether the world is slowing down, whether it's been weighed down by its debts. That's being reflected in sliding inflation in lots of other countries. And the UK today, a record low inflation number on the consumer price index of just 0.3%. That was flagged by the Bank of England Governor Mark Carney last week, who said he would try and look through that, blaming the falling price of oil. But now that you've got 20 central banks worldwide loosening monetary policy in 2015 already, officials are clearly becoming more concerned. The world's being weighed down by the debts that were built up before and indeed after the 2007 financial crisis.
Yeah, but the thing about central banks is when they all do the same thing, it kind of doesn't become really effective, does it?
Well, I think this is I think that you've got more and more dissent creeping into the market now. This is, as you said, the seventh year that we've seen ultra-loose monetary policy of rock-bottom interest rates, of quantitative easing, of government money, of central bank money printing, and it doesn't seem to be having the desired effect. Now, Indonesia, the economy did grow 5% last year, and inflation's still 6%. But nevertheless, their economy shrank in the fourth quarter. They're clearly becoming concerned by the devaluation of the Japanese yen, by loose policy in other countries driving their currencies down. And the Bank of Indonesia clearly wants to maintain a very competitive currency to try and export its way to growth as well.
Interesting. They're all at it. Thank you very much, Russ Mould from the stockbroker AJ Bell. Let's have a quick look through the market numbers. In New York, the Dow is down, really hardly moved, down 0.1% at 17,997. In London, the FTSE 100 index is up 0.6% at 6,898. If you're looking at currency markets, the euro's at $1.13.9 cents, the pound at $1.53.5, and topically in New York, April New York light crude oil is currently down $1.2 at $52.47 a barrel. Now, 2 billionaire entrepreneurs are battling it out to bring the world a new way to access high-speed internet. Not on land, though, but through space. Elon Musk and Richard Branson want to use satellites to give developing countries and rural areas access to broadband. Mike Johnson's been looking at their chances of success.
T-minus 10, 9, 8,
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And liftoff. The Falcon takes flight.
It's almost half a century since Stanley Kubrick's epic science fiction film 2001: A Space Odyssey. Now there's a very 21st century space race underway between two of the world's most famous and most wealthy entrepreneurs.
I didn't originally intend to start a rocket company.
First, Elon Musk co-founded PayPal. Then he set up the electric car company Tesla. Now he's hoping to fly people to Mars and build a city there for them to live in. It was his rocket, the Falcon 9, which you heard taking off a few moments ago. This was Elon Musk talking to the BBC last year.
The thing that got me into space was that year after year I kept expecting us to advance beyond Earth and to put a person on Mars and have a base on the moon. If you read the books or saw the movies, that's what you'd expect. And just year after year, nothing happened. The public is very interested in space exploration. They just need to believe that it's possible and that it won't break the bank.
Fortunately, Elon Musk has a rather large personal bank of money. His very latest space project is to launch a fleet of satellites to make internet faster and more accessible here on Earth. An enterprise which will take at least 5 years and cost around $10 billion. Pitted against him is Richard Branson, the British entrepreneur who founded the Virgin Entertainment and Airline Group. He's invested in a rival plan by the Florida company OneWeb. Its founder is Greg Weiler.
About half the world has limited to no connectivity, and there was only one way to solve that problem, and that's through designing a global network, a global satellite system that can provide internet access cost-effectively to the rural parts of the world.
Greg Weiler says his plan to bring internet from the sky would cost a mere $2 billion. It will put into orbit around 650 small satellites, each costing about $350,000. That's relative peanuts in space terms. But can it actually be done?
Well, one company hoping to benefit from this new internet space race is based here in the south of England. It's called Surrey Satellite Systems, and I'm standing in the satellite testing hall. Around me are about a dozen or so engineers with hairnets on and long overalls. It's a very clean environment. You can hear the sound of the air conditioning here. 2 vast doors. It's like a big aircraft hangar here at either end of this big hall. With me is director of the company, John Paffett. When we talk about internet by satellite, how interesting, how intriguing is that for you?
It's a great idea. How can we drive the technology and the performance up whilst bringing the price down to enable many of these systems to be put into place?
Cost will be the key issue, not just for companies, but for consumers too. OneWeb's Greg Weiler says that to get his service, you'll pay about $250 up front for a receiver to go on top of your house. Then about 10 cents a day to download around 50 megabytes of data. That's fine if you're just reading text-based web pages or checking emails or your Twitter and Facebook accounts. Not so fine, though, if you want to watch video. Streaming a feature film would gobble up around 13 times as much data. If you are living on less than $2 a day, that would take up most of your income. The Washington-based space journalist Frank Moring thinks that could be a big problem.
Both of these ideas seem to be pitched to the parts of the world that don't have the kind of broadband access that we're accustomed to in the more developed world. The question is, will the markets be there, particularly in places like Africa, Central Asia, where there isn't a very vibrant economy to pay for it?
Back in the test hall at Surrey Satellite Technology, John Paffett says it'll be a tough challenge, turning out satellites cheaply enough to make low-cost global broadband from space profitable. Unless, of course, you happen to be a multi-billionaire with some of the deepest pockets in the universe.
Worldview and Elon Musk, they're looking at full global coverage with somewhere between 500 and 5,000 spacecraft.
So really you need to be a multi-billionaire entrepreneur to make something like this work.
You need deep pockets and a lot of supporters. I think that's definitely the case.
That's Mike Johnson looking at broadband via space. I'm just trying to imagine what would happen if your 10-year-old child got hold of your computer and started downloading feature films on a satellite broadband link. Just imagine how expensive that would be. Don't forget a podcast of this programme is always available from iTunes or the BBC Business page at Facebook. Thanks a lot for listening.
You've been listening to World Business Report from the BBC World Service. For more news and analysis, download Business Matters, our daily hour-long mix of current affairs and debate, published at breakfast time in Asia and Europe. We debate key trends in the worlds of work, politics, technology and the environment. Find it at bbc.com/podcasts. You can also follow us and get our latest audio at twitter.com/BBC World Biz and talk to us on Facebook at facebook.com/BBC Business.
This is distributing products from snacks to pharmaceuticals in trucks to shops around the country. So how is the company coping in the civil war?
It is becoming difficult and challenging, and we are under constant crisis management situation. But we keep on trying because we need to provide the necessities to all the people. It is extremely difficult, extremely costly. It is very difficult to find people willing to do it, but some with great determination and willing to help. We are just covering, but it's not easy. Anything can get disrupted any minute, any time, and people can end up with bullets in their heads.
Yes, how do you try to guarantee the safety of your employees?
The first thing that we tell all our employees, their safety, of course, is first and foremost. Some of them take their own risk, but something that we completely discourage them to do. But because they belong from one area or the other and they feel that it is urge and need to deliver baby food and medicines, they do take risks, even though we tell them that it is not a question of bravery, it's a question of safety and security first. But yet many go ahead and do it.
Have you had any employees injured or killed?
Killed so far, not luckily, but we had one injured on the way coming from Garian to Tripoli after making a delivery there. But of course, warehouses have been looted, some warehouses have been even hit by missiles. So our major warehouses at Benghazi have been completely taken over.
Taken over by militia?
By militias, yes.
So what do you do? Do you have to deal with the militia or do you store stuff elsewhere?
No, absolutely. We simply, because we are present almost in every city, so we just move the operation to another.
Anniversary today, the 17th of February of the uprising against Muammar Gaddafi, but every story that comes out of Libya suggests a country becoming more violent and difficult to live in. Two rival governments operating their own armed forces under separate parliaments, plus Islamist militants, former rebels, soldiers who fought for Gaddafi, and tribal and federalist factions, all causing a chaotic mix. The beheading by Libyan Islamic State militants of 21 Egyptian Christians a couple of days ago being the most gruesome illustration of that. The UN Security Council has said it'll meet on Wednesday to discuss the situation. This lunchtime, the Egyptian President, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, has called on the UN to approve international military intervention against IS in Libya. President Sisi told French radio that unless something is done, the whole region could be at risk.
اللي بيحصل في ليبيا هتبقى بؤرة إرهاب هتوجه ضد المنطقة بالكامل.
What is going on in Libya could change this country into a breeding ground.
This is the download edition of World Business Report on Tuesday, the 17th of February. I'm Dominic Laurie. On the 4th anniversary of Libya's uprising against Muammar Gaddafi, we assess how its violent aftermath has destroyed hopes for jobs and economic success for so many of its people.
The world has forgotten about Libya. Libya is isolated, besieged, is descending into war. It's the criminalization of the war economy.
France says it will pass new economic reforms, but not via the usual channels, and it's kicked up a storm. And we go to Texas, where the falling oil price has been a curse for the fracking industry, but a blessing for others.
I love the price of gas because I can fill up my tank on $20.
So what are you doing with all the money you've got now?
I go shop.
Send us your views. Get in touch by email world.business@bbc.co.uk or via Facebook at facebook.com/BBC Business. It may be the fourth anniversary.
Threaten the whole region, and not only Egypt. Egypt, the Mediterranean basin and Europe have to deal with this problem because the mission was unaccomplished, was unfinished by our European friends. We abandoned the Libyan people as prisoners to extremist militias.
Now, the devastation isn't just human and emotional, but economic. The oil and gas industry has managed to keep some production going, but Libya's oil production has fallen to around 350,000 barrels a day, a fraction of the 1.6 million barrels per day Libya used to pump before the NATO-backed 2011 uprising that ended Gaddafi's rule. On Saturday, Libya's National Oil Corporation said it urgently needed more official protection after an oil pipeline from its El Saria field was sabotaged. Other parts of the economy have suffered greatly too. Media has been heavily disrupted, with TV and radio stations stormed by militants. Husni Bey is the chairman of the biggest private holding company in Libya. Its main business